Hello and welcome to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the show where two British brothers talk all things NFL. I'm your host, Dom Corbs, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nick Corbs. And Nick, you're back in London.
I am indeed, and I'm really looking forward to this episode, Dom. It's a topic that both of us hold close to our hearts, so I'm looking forward to dive into it.
Absolutely. We're really excited for this episode because we're doing our wide receiver installment of Draft Watch. So to recap what Draft Watch is, that's when myself and Nu, we go over some of the players that you might need to know about for the upcoming NFL draft and giving an early preview of what their skills and their weaknesses are, including our early rankings of those players. Now, it goes without saying that obviously the college football season has only just started and there's always late risers. People go back to school as well. So these aren't our definitive be-all and end-all lists. They're more a kind of a breathing, living document which we'll keep on editing and keep on looking back to. It's just a fun activity for us to introduce our listeners to the new wide receiver class and for us to get ahead on some of the scouting profiles of the prospects ahead of the 2025 NFL draft. So the way this episode is going to work is we're going to really discuss our top three wide receivers. And again, as the season goes on, there might be a player that really rises up the boards. This isn't to say that this is going to be our top three for the whole season. It's just our early top three as of this point, as at recording, which is the 2nd of September. So it is really, really, really early days still. With us only talking about three wide receivers, there are two that I want to shout out quickly that we're not going to discuss in depth. That is Isaiah Bond, the wide receiver who now plays at Texas, who used to play at Alabama. I've weirdly been watching him for 3 years because one of the first PFF games that I had to practice on when I was doing my this grading thing for them was Alabama LSU from 2021, 2022. So he's been on my weirdly been on my radar for a while. He's a really smooth and fluid runner. He keeps up his speed. He's definitely one to watch at Texas with Quinn Ewers now that he's the number one on that offense. And the other is Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State, who I thought was going to declare last year, and I really wanted the Texans to draft in the late end of the first round, but he went back to school in the end, back to Ohio State, and he should have another big year as well. But we're not going to talk about those two in more depth. So, Nu, who is your wide receiver 3?
So my wide receiver 3 is Travis Hunter. So Travis Hunter, you might know him, the cover athlete of NCAA 25, the cornerback receiver hybrid, had an amazing game against North Dakota State this past weekend. 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards, 7 catches, played 115 out of the 117 snaps this game. He was electric. The thing that really sets him apart this game is his pure athleticism. He looks like he's playing against kids out there. He's quicker, he's faster, he's quicker, he's faster, he's got good route running. It's not excellent, but it's good route running, and he's got amazing hands. He made a great catch down the sideline against North Dakota State this past weekend. I think there's a lot to watch there. There are also some downsides, though, with Hunter that I think are important to highlight. His biggest skill is his versatility, by far. And we've seen in the NFL players like Isaiah Simmons, who are safety linebacker hybrids, not be able to use their versatility correctly. How on earth will a cornerback receiver use his versatility correctly? Because you're only going to play one, because it's too many snaps, too high risk of injury. So I think he's going to commit to just playing receiver. And if he does that, I can really iron out his technique, work on his technique, and not just rely on his athleticism. I think he's a nailed-on top 10 pick in this year's draft.
I think you've nailed that, Nu. We're gonna cover a lot of the same things, I think, with these receivers, and Travis Hunter is absolutely no exception to that. So he's the wide receiver from Colorado, 6'1", 185 pounds. Last year, he had 57 receptions for 721 yards and 5 touchdowns. And I think you're right, Nu. That clip against NDSU, that fade, that kind of like goal line fade where he just somehow plucked the ball out of the air. It looked like a Madden glitch almost. His body control is amazing, and you saw it in that catch. He's also quite elusive after the catch. He's pretty fearless. He can go over the middle of the field, put his body on the line. I think, though, Nu, you nailed it with your kind of assessment of the benefits and the disadvantages, or the advantages and the disadvantages of him playing both ways. Now, Colorado are a better team when Travis Hunter is playing both wide receiver and cornerback, right? He's their best player by a mile. It's one of the highest recruits of all time. Him going to Colorado at the time was a massive deal. And that's the thing, is that I don't think the best version of Travis Hunter is when he plays both ways. Like, there's a reason why it's not really done at college. It is often at high school when the difference of athlete is massive, that you kind of just out athlete people and just be fitter and stronger and bigger and faster and quicker and all this malarkey. And obviously at college that's hard, and in the NFL it's impossible. There's no way he's going to play both ways in the NFL. That's just not going to happen. Anyone that says it is, I think, is delusional, frankly. But you can tell he plays both ways, I think. Like, you obviously are not going to get the best out of your wide receiver if he's also playing cornerback, if he's never coming off the field. I mean, if you just think about the NFL, for example, when there's a big catch by any wide receiver, anything more than a 10-yard gain, they come off the field to rest, because it's an explosive position. You need to be quick. You need to be fit. You need to, give 100% every rep. And understandably, he can't do that because he's doing two positions in the same game. And I think him playing both ways means that he's only like an intriguing wide receiver prospect at the moment. Like, he's my wide receiver 4 actually on this list. I have someone else ahead of him. Not because I don't think Travis Hunter is insanely talented. He is. But because he's literally, at the moment, almost being a jack of all trades but a master of none, but obviously only with two positions. You can just tell he plays both ways, I think, and that's the biggest issue for me with Travis Hunter.
Well, Dom, also a big thing is his frame. He looks like a cornerback. He does not look like a receiver, and we've seen slimmer receivers, Alabama receiver on the Heisman.
Devonta Smith.
Sorry. We've seen Devonta Smith have success at the NFL level with a similar frame. But if he wants to play receiver, he's going to have to bulk up to play on the outside. Or he can keep the weight how he is now and play as a corner, but he needs to make a decision, and needs to make a decision pre-March, really, before the draft process starts.
That's it. No, yeah, we literally. Have you copied my notes? have you had a look at my notes? I said the exact same thing. I said, yeah, like he's slender, like, and he looks slender. He's 6'1", 185 pounds. Like, obviously 185 pounds isn't bad, but Tank Dell is 165, and he's like one of the lightest receivers in the league, and maybe ever. And he's definitely not 6'1", so like he's a very slender build. And he got taken out for 3 games because of an injury. Like, when he gets hit, he doesn't take it well. Like, he gets rocked and he gets brought down by arm tackles. And so he just needs to commit to one of these positions, because he's not going to play both in the NFL. And I can already see the song and dance. He's going to say he can play both. There's going to be a few people like Dion who's going to say he can play both. But like, you can already see it at the college level. It's making him a worse receiver. And I've not watched his tape as a corner, but I'd wager very good money that it's also having the same impact on him as a corner. He needs to pick one. And like you said, I needs to do it soon. But I think I just want him to play one position, and I want to see him really excel at that one position. Is my bottom line with Travis Hunter.
So, Dom, if you got Hunter at your 4, who do you have as your number 3 receiver?
Hunter's at my 4. This is where we might go a bit off script here, Nu. Okay. I've got Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri, as my wide receiver 3.
That's just wrong. Like, what do you mean he's your wide receiver 3? That is just, what do you mean?
Okay, look, hear me out. Where's he for you?
He's my number 2. But that's because I read it. But it's 1A and 1B, and I think he's a nailed-on top 10 pick.
No way is he nailed on top 10, mate.
Okay, explain. You make your case first, and I'll make my case.
All right, here's my case for Luther Burden, right? So he's 5'11", 208 pounds. Last year he had 86 receptions, 1,209 yards, 9 touchdowns. He is a playmaker. And I don't give this comparison lightly, because we've literally just seen him. But when I was watching him, I thought Malik Neighbors. Now, he's not quite as explosive or quite as dynamic as Malik Neighbors, but it's not far off. Like, he is a playmaker. That's the one word I would use to describe him. He was 3rd in all of college football last year in yards after catch, 724 yards after catch, and he had 20 missed tackles forced, which was tied 15th. Missouri get him the ball as much as they can, and he's an offensive weapon. He lines up in the backfield. He's on jet sweeps, orbit motions. He is that kind of quote unquote modern receiver, like Malik Neighbors. You don't just line up at the X and just run fades and run posts and run hitches. Like, they get him the ball as much and as often and as quickly as they can. And there was a play against LSU where he was lined up in the backfield. So again, like they get him the ball as often as they can by any means necessary. He was lined up in the backfield, ran a Texas route, which is basically when you come outside of the tackle and then come back in to kind of sit in the soft spot behind the defensive line. And he caught the ball like 5 yards away from the line of scrimmage, made half the defense miss. They almost like ran into each other like something out of a comedy, and then took it for a 20-yard gain. Like, I think he is one of one in this class in that respect, in terms of taking a ball that is thrown behind the line of scrimmage and turning it into a first down or even more. And he's really shifted with the ball in his hands. So 41 of his 86 receptions were behind the line of scrimmage. As I said, they're trying to get this guy the ball by any means necessary, come hell or high water. But I think he's got the skills to be more of a downfield threat. Where the reason why he's my wide receiver 3 and not any higher than that, which actually I was really surprised by the overall strength of this class. We've heard a lot about how it's a defense dominated class. The wide receiver class is really good. For me to have Burden as my 3 at the moment, I was really impressed by. My weaknesses, I think the weaknesses that Luther Burden has are quite massive, I would say, actually. So he had 82% of his snaps were lined up from the slot, and only 13% of them were from out wide. Now, there's a debate here when you have a player in the slot and you have a player like Luther Burden. Is it a question of, do they have to play in the slot? Because if they play out wide, they'll get exposed by press coverage or by a more extensive route tree, and it's harder to kind of find those soft spots in the zone when you're playing out wide than when you're playing in the slot? Or is it because they just want to get him the ball? Now, I think it's a combination of both of those things. I think he does lack some physicality. He can make defenders miss with his agility, but if they're not being thrown off by his cuts and by his sharp breaks, if they get an arm on him, he's coming down. So he's not breaking tackles with physicality. And his route tree is pretty limited. It's loads of flats, loads of speed outs. The only kind of semi-deep route he runs, like this post curl that he runs, it's like he runs it like multiple times a game. And he's rarely pressed. And when he was pressed, which I saw like 3 times, he did not shine. And I think Mizzou know that, and they're trying to protect him from that press coverage, because I don't think he'll succeed against it, frankly. I think he's got the potential to be a lot more than he currently is, which is what's frustrating, is because I hope that this year, so Malik Neighbors, for example, last 2 years ago, not last year, he had the same kind of snaps in the slot versus snaps out wide. He was a majority slot player. And then in his final year at LSU, he took a lot more snaps out wide. It was almost a 50-50 split. I was hoping that would be the case for Luther Burden this year. Another year in the system, another year of developing your body as well as your game. You're bigger and so on and so forth. He only played 1 snap out wide in week 1. 1. 92% of his snaps were not out wide. And for me, if you can't play out wide in the NFL, you're not going to be a top 10 pick. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I kind of see similarities in their games, the way they just kind of like get open in the short area of the field and can convert and all that malarkey. He's in the slot only 55% of the time. Like at the moment, Burden's like 86. That is way too high for me. So that's why I'm a bit lower on him.
Well, Dom, I like that Neighbors comparison, but I see more like Deebo Samuel and the way the Niners use Deebo Samuel. So a lot of his passes are in the short game. He gets a lot of sweeps, a lot of runs, always treats like this H-back, this hybrid player that's able to do basically anything on the field. And also, I think the big one that I think you failed to mention when you bring up that LSU game is that he's in the SEC. He's not going against Uber drivers and gardeners out there. He's going against Derek Stingleys of the world. These players are going to play in the NFL most likely. We look at Travis Hunter against North Dakota State. North Dakota State are no bums, but they're literally the division below. Luther Burden has been playing at this level in the SEC. And for him playing out wide, I do understand that criticism. I completely do. But he does have the size, the speed, and the strength to do it. I agree with you. I don't quite know why he can't, because when I see him in the open field, I think his route running's, again, limited, but I think he's good enough to shake a defender. But
so do I.
But he just seems like he's just paralyzed when he's out there. I think that could be changed with training and better practice. He's just not asked to do it. But I think those are fair criticisms, but I really, really think that he's a dynamic playmaker and a big difference maker. And he's made that Missouri team much, much better. They finished, I want to say, ranked in the top 10 or the top 15 for a team that basically had no hope 2 years ago for being one of the contending for an SEC championship. And Burden was a massive reason why.
Yeah, I think that's it though, with Burden, isn't it? Is that like he has all the skills to be better. I don't know why Mizzou aren't letting him play out wide, or they're not making him run a more extensive route tree. And maybe it is a case like, Bo Nix at Oregon. Like, if they're winning games, why are you going to change a winning formula? Like, college teams are there to win games, so they want their players to get drafted, but that's not their top priority in a season. It's to try and win as many games as possible. So it could easily be that that's just their best opportunity to win games, like Travis Hunter playing both ways, right? It's what benefits the team, not what benefits the player. I think that it's just that question of what is it? Are they trying to protect him? I think they are a little bit, but I agree. I just want to see him try and do that, because I think he has got the skills. He's got the agility. He's got the route running. He's got the speed. He's got good hands. He has a 56% contested catch rate at 5'11". Like, that's really, really good. Anything above 50 for a receiver at like 6'2" is good. That's not part of his game. That's not like how he wins. So to have all that yak yards, the really high contested catch percentage, he ticks so many boxes, but the box that he doesn't tick is that out wide. Can you beat press coverage? Can you be an X receiver? Because that was even really asked of Malik Neighbors. Like, can he be that X in a class with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze, who are those traditional 6 foot plus X wide receivers, can win deep down the field? And Neighbors showed that he could in his final year, and I really hope Burden does, because he's really, really good. And really, him being my wide receiver 3 is only because I like someone else more. I think Travis Hunter for me is outside of that top tier at the moment. I think he is definitely in my top tier of wide receiver.
Okay, so who's your number 2 then, Dom? I'm quite intrigued to find out.
So my number 2, my wide receiver 2, I absolutely love this guy, probably too much, but it's Alec Iomano from Stanford, the wide receiver from Stanford. Okay, now let me put you onto something, okay? So this guy is 6'2", 210 pounds. Right, X receiver right there, traditional outside. 63 receptions last year for 1,022 yards, 6 touchdowns. He missed his whole 2022 season because he tore his ACL, MCL, and meniscus. So a really serious injury, missed his whole 2022 season, which was his first year in college. Last year was his first year back, and he had a big year for Stanford, but doesn't get the eyes on him because he's playing for Stanford. Obviously, like when I'm watching the All-22, you see how empty that stadium is. He is a size and speed freak. He ran a 10.76 100 meter in high school at 6'2". Like, this guy is an alien. Okay, he covers ground insanely fast. When you're watching him on tape, he eats up that DB's cushion with like 6 strides. Like, he is moving, and the DBs have to flip their hips really early because he's got the wheels to get past them. He's a great route runner. At 6'2", he should not be moving like that. He's not just a fade merchant or a contested catch merchant. He's winning on slants and winning often. He's got sharp cuts. He sets up defensive backs. He breaks on their toes. He attacks their blind spot. He wins on double moves. He absolutely cooked Colorado and Travis Hunter. Did you see that game? Do you know what his stat line was in that game?
I didn't. I haven't seen that film actually. So would you please?
Okay, so I didn't even know about this until I can't believe I missed this last year. But he cooked Colorado and Travis Hunter, right? He went for 13 receptions, 294 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Colorado and Travis Hunter did not have an answer for him. And I say Travis Hunter deliberately because Travis Hunter was lined up against him multiple times this game, and he was frankly put in a blender. He took a 95-yard slant to the house. He's got the jets to go all the way. Nobody was able to chase him down. He beat up on Travis Hunter, scored 1 touchdown on him, but should have been at least 2. He beat him on a fade immediately off from the line. And that's the thing with Iomano, is that he's beating a corner like Travis Hunter, who has a very strong possibility to be the first cornerback taken in this year's NFL draft, right? One of the top corner prospects in the draft, no doubt. He's beating him immediately at the release. At 6'2", 210 pounds. He's not even a Luther Burden build, the 5'11", a bit smaller, a bit shiftier. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. And he's beating Travis Hunter off the snap, like immediately with the release. And then we'll beat him in the route as well, because he's got the speed and he's got the route running. And the only reason I think why he's not my one, okay, I don't think he can be the one, because I think the other guy is definitely better.
Yeah.
But I also think that there is a slight lack of lateral agility, which is understandable because of that knee.
Well, Dom, I was about to ask you, obviously modern medicine does wonders, and we see players, an ACL tear is a minor setback these days. Full knee construction surgery is still, I think, on the same tier as Achilles tear. It does. These things can be career enders and are more often career enders than they are not. Do you know, was it a non-contact injury, or was it? Do Did you know how it came about?
I actually don't know. I know he didn't play any game, so it wasn't in a game. It might have been, but I don't think you can have an injury like that not from contact. But I don't know. I didn't actually check. I just wanted to check that I got the fact that it was the ACL, the MCL, and the meniscus, which it definitely was.
Yeah, because that's going to affect your lateral agility, and that's also not going to get better. When you repair that much ligaments, they take it up from your hamstring, taking it everywhere. How dependable is that week in, week out?
This is the thing. When you watch his tape, at the beginning of the year, he's wearing a brace, understandably. Anything to just mentally to help yourself recover from that. And towards the end of the season, he wasn't wearing that brace. And when you're putting up stats like you are against Colorado, which, look, as a whole aren't a good team, but Travis Hunter definitely is. And when you're putting up over 1,000 yards, it's clearly a option for you to play on that knee, for example. It's clearly possible to play with an injury like that if you're putting up those stats. That wasn't if that's his version of a timid season, 1,000 yards, almost a 300-yard single game, then I think we're on a good course here for a total hopeful recovery. But I think you did see that slight lack of lateral agility. And this is the thing with those injuries, is that I've been fortunate enough to not have a serious injury like that. But by all accounts, from what other people say, is that really the bigger side of those injuries are the mental aspect. How quickly can you recover mentally? Can you trust to plant off that knee? Are you scared of being contacted if someone hits you again and risks re-injuring it? And being a year on from that, having this massive season under his belt, I think is going to really help that confidence and really help that mental improvement, which you definitely need from a really, really serious injury. But there's a fine, and the one thing I also want to mention about him, which is why I think the only other reason why he might not be as high on other people's boards and might be one of those receivers that we don't really hear that much about, is because his quarterback play is an issue. Like, his quarterback is leaving so many plays on the table. He's either not seeing Iomano, or he's throwing it late, or bad ball placement.
And that is,
he's not still at Stanford, Tanner McKee.
No, he just left by last year. Was it Tanner McKee?
No, Tanner McKee was 2 years ago at least.
We'll get Paddy.
Because he was drafted by the Eagles. He was drafted by the Eagles.
Yeah.
We'll get Paddy to check that. To check that. But the quarterback play for Iomano is just not good. Frankly, it's not good at all, and that's leaving a lot of plays on the table. Like I said, against Colorado, he had 3 touchdowns. It should have been 5, at least. Genuinely, there was a whip route which he ran. He was open for a touchdown. He beat Travis Hunter for a touchdown. That's 2 right there, and that's only what comes to mind. And when in the other games that I was watching, it was much the same thing. He was streaking wide open down the field, quarterbacks getting sacked or bailing out of a clean pocket or overthrowing the ball. So that's one problem. And the second problem is that he can sometimes drop passes and himself can leave plays on the table. So the combination of both of those things aren't a good one. He can't afford to have a clanger and take off a massive gain off the table when he's only getting so many opportunities in a game. But my hot take, which is going to lead us into, I believe, our number 1 receiver, is that I think that Iomano has closer movement skills to Rome Odunze than Tetairoa McMillan does.
Oh, okay. So let's talk about Tetairoa McMillan for a second. So Dom, he's my number 1 receiver. I assume he's your number 1 receiver.
Indeed.
I'm going to get a step further. Tetairoa McMillan is the number 1 player on my draft board. I believe he's the best player in this draft. And the only caveat I do have to that is I haven't watched Pierce, the edge out of Tennessee, yet. But
it won't be him.
But of what I've read, Tetairoa McMillan is my number 1 overall player in this draft class. His combination of size, weight, speed, and hands is mental. Obviously, look at this past game when he put up 309 yards or 13 receptions for 4 touchdowns. He was asked about how good his hands were. He asked, "Are you Spider-Man?" He replied, "No, I'm bigger." And I completely agree. This man is a superhero out there. I haven't seen a player look like this since Calvin Johnson for the Lions, and I believe he can be that type of player. The closest person that we have in the league to him right now is DK Metcalf, and I'm so high on him. So Dom, I want to know what you think.
Well, that's high praise there, Nu. That is high praise. So I think you're absolutely right. I think Tetairoa McMillan put on a clinic, literally a potentially record-breaking performance. It was the second most receiving yards in a game ever at 304 yards, 10 receptions, 4 touchdowns. Insane, right? Absolutely insane. And he is that Marvin Harrison Jr.-esque, like traditional ex-wide receiver, height and build, and is treated as such by Arizona. He spends 75% of his snaps outside, but it's also good that he does get moved into the slot. I think it gives him some versatility, which I think all of the best wide receivers in the league have. Look at CeeDee Lamb. Like, if you can play from the slot and you can be your team's number one option, then great. Like, just move you around the offense. He's also left on the backside of trips, so he's always got man-to-man coverage, and he's just bigger than everyone else. And the ball skills, I think that's what's most impressive to me, is the ball skills. Like, obviously, look, I don't think he's 6'5". I'm going to put it out there. I think he's actually 6'4", right? An inch, okay, here and there, a bit like me. I'm 6'4". But I don't think he's 6'5", man. I think he's 6'4". And I think when he gets measured, I think it's going to be like a lot closer to 6'4" than it is to 6'5". But that's...
Dom, you're nitpicking here. He brings in 30% of all attempts at are caught. His hands, he doesn't drop anything. And number one thing as a receiver is catching the ball, fundamentally. And he does that better than anyone.
Yeah, no, look, you're absolutely right. I'm coming across like a hater here. I am. I just wanted to make my opinion clear. But yeah, I mean, his ball skills, I think, are the most impressive thing that he has going for him. Like, he's always catching away from his body. I hate those big-bodied, contested catch wide receivers who just catch everything with their chest, right? Quentin Johnston, for example, right? Lo and behold, one of the worst first-round draft picks in recent memory. And then you've got other players. Who's that Eagle player? Jalen Reagor. The list of big-bodied, contested catch wide receivers who really can't catch is a bit traumatic, which is why I'm almost a bit hesitant to be so high on Tetairoa McMillan. But that would be dishonest to him as a player, because that's not how he plays. Like, he catches everything away from his body, and his ball skills are insane. He only had 2 drops from 90 receptions last year. Like, that's one of the best hands you'll see in college football. And he's got great mobility for a receiver on his size. We saw that obviously in the first game of this season, and you can see it on his tape from last year as well. And I think that with Tetairoa McMillan, I think we might see that that kind of Malik Neighbors jump, that really okay, this guy, more accurately, it would be a Rome Odunze. He was on the radar as a potential top wide receiver, and then obviously last year became one of the best we've seen in quite a few years. And already I think this is the case with McMillan, that he might have taken a massive jump from just last year to now. And I think what's really interesting with him, and I'll talk about this in his weaknesses in a second, but you can come in between, is he's got this unreal chemistry with Noah Fafita, who's the quarterback for Arizona. And out of structure, those two cook. Like, that 78-yard catch and run touchdown that he had, I think was the second one. You can see that those guys have played in high school together, because the play doesn't even break down. When I was just watching McMillan, I thought, Fafita's going to be rolling out to his right, because for some reason, McMillan settles in between the zone, but then just suddenly moves. And he doesn't. These guys almost work on one of those psychic twins. They're just kind of sending each other mind control from the other side of the field. And RG3 compared Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter to Mahomes and Kelsey, and I think that's a crazy comparison. But I think with regards to outer structure play, I think Noah Fafita and Tetairoa McMillan are Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey. They just know exactly where they need to be for one another. And it shows that they've played together for a long, long time.
That is true, Dom. So, yeah, just a bit of context. They first met when they were 14. They're both quarterbacks. Fafita's dad was the quarterback's coach and told McMillan to move to receiver. And I guess the rest, as you could say, is history. But I think you're right, Dom. I think our structure, there's something that they just know. And that is something that is very hard to replicate. Having chemistry with a quarterback or vice versa does take a long time to come in. And the our structure plays, as you can tell, they almost move in tandem in the same direction at all times. But also, one thing that we haven't quite touched on with McMillan is his speed. So last year, he clocked in at over 22 miles an hour. As a note, Tyreek Hill, the fastest receiver in the league, one of the fastest people on the planet, 23 and a half. So McMillan does have that top end speed, although his route tree is limited, as I think, Dom, you might talk about in his negatives here.
Mm-hmm.
He only really runs almost a DK Metcalf style route tree of in the middle, over the top, hitch. That's sort of it. And I guess with that physicality that you are able to do that, and Metcalf has had success in the NFL, but I think McMillan can do more.
I completely agree with you. This is I think I almost see McMillan in the same way that I see Carson Beck. Both these guys are the number one prospects at their relative positions, but because of that, they're almost held to a higher degree of expectation. And with McMillan, the DK Metcalf comp is a really good one, actually. I was kind of like, is he a Mike Evans type? Blah, blah. I think DK Metcalf is a really, really good suggestion from you. But I think, yeah, his route running, a bit like DK's, isn't. It definitely needs some polish. I think Iomana is a better route runner than him, 100%. I think Burden's a better route runner, even on a limited route tree.
Probably the best route runner.
Egbuka, definitely. Bond, definitely. Like, I think his route running is a not a problem, but definitely something I want to see him improve at. Like against Colorado last year, it's quite funny because he also got a touchdown on Travis Hunter, which we'll talk about as well. He ran the most ugly whip route I've ever seen on the goal line. Oh my god, it was like it was installed for the first time on the sideline in that game. Like he really did not have a clue what the hell was going on. And that's things I think he doesn't rely on his size to actually catch the ball because he's not like, playing that like basketball, blocking people out and going up for the ball. Like he's got really good hands. So it's not that he's relying on his size for the catch, but I think he does rely on his size for the separation aspect almost. Like he doesn't create a lot of separation. 34 contested targets was the most in college football last year. Now, obviously, that stat isn't simply, well, that means that he's not separating. Contested targets are simply, are you being thrown the ball in a position where the DB can also make a play on it? And it might just be that Fafita is throwing McMillan the ball more often when he's being covered because he knows probably he's going to come down with it. So it's not as simple as, okay, he's got the most contested targets, therefore he can't get open. But having the most doesn't mean that he is getting open. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not trying to extrapolate. I'm not trying to extrapolate that and say like, oh my god, this means he doesn't get open. But he doesn't create separation quite like the others do in the kind of the top three or even the top four, like Travis Hunter. 50% contested catch rate is obviously really good. Like I said, anything 50% and above is good. I'd almost like to see that being a bit higher, dare I say. Again, maybe I'm sounding a bit like a hater here, but my guy is 6'4", like
allegedly,
and he's playing against potential gardeners and potential Uber drivers. Yeah. Like I want to see him like bully people, and I don't really see him do that. He almost wins more with finesse, it seems sometimes. But I also think with the speed thing you mentioned right now, 22 miles an hour, and you saw that speed on that 78-yard touchdown where he caught it and turned on the jets and ran. I don't see that speed when he's running his routes though.
I think that's fair. Those are two different skills almost, route speed compared to ball and hand speed. Similar to Burden. Burden's much better with the ball in his hands than he's not. But I think on your point about finesse is very true. He doesn't really muscle up people. He was a collegiate volleyball player as well, so he's got hops. This is someone who knows how to catch the ball, and I can't think about who it's against. Almost a Ricky Pearsall style grab in between two defenders, over the top one hand, and he just needs to bully people more because that size will translate to the NFL. Like you said, he uses his hands away from the body. He's very traditionally trained. And I think he sort of almost needs to forget some of that and just think, I'm bigger, I'm faster, I am better, and I want the ball more than you do.
Yeah, I want to see him cut it loose.
Yeah.
I want to see him posterize and just bully defensive backs and just making the same plays. And he does do that. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. He has more. I think he has even more to offer, and that's what's almost scary about McMillan is that he's had this massive, I say breakout, quote unquote. He was already on people's radars before the season even started, so it's not quite like a breakout game. But in terms of becoming a name amongst most people that watch college football, this is his kind of breakout game in week 1 of the college football season, and I think he could easily build on it. It's a long season. We're talking about this, as I said, in early September. Come, November, we might be saying, oh my God, this guy is an absolute behemoth. But yeah, I mean, even DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, people that just win on being physical and win on being bigger. DeAndre Hopkins, even as well, a wide receiver kind of who wins in a similar way. Different build though. Those guys are smaller than him, at least height-wise. And when you think of them and you think of how they play and you think of their highlight reels, they are absolutely embarrassing defensive backs out there. And again, he is, but not in the way that you'd imagine him to as a 6 foot, maybe 6'5" wide receiver. But yeah, and I just think I just think what I've written here on my notes is that he has that high end speed, clearly, right? I mean, 22 miles an hour, definitely nothing to shake a stick at, and we saw it in this game. But he rarely kicks it into that top gear. And it's almost like when I was watching AD Mitchell, it was the same with him. And he said, I like to use tempo. I don't want to time myself out. La la la. I'm sure there are reasons for all of these things. It's less of a critique of McMillan and more just kind of something that interests me as to why he doesn't do those things.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah, but with the out of structure thing, which is obviously amazing. You know, seeing a quarterback and a wide receiver be just on that same plane of thinking is amazing every single time. But the flip side there is that he's not going to be able to win like that in the NFL because presumably he's not going to be playing with Nerva Fafita. So the out-of-structure plays, whilst are amazing, are going to be something that he can't rely on in the NFL, at least for the first few years of him playing. You know, maybe if he plays with Patrick Mahomes, then okay, fine, he can kind of take that Travis Kelce role if he gets drafted by the Chiefs. I mean, I'm sure he won't be able to be, but just as an example. So yeah, I mean, McMillan is a monster. And we saw him become a monster in week 1, but I want to see him become even more of a monster. Do you know what I mean?
I completely agree, Dom. He almost reminds me of your playing days out in Nottingham.
Oh, man, he should be so lucky to get the comparison to me. I was like, they didn't even put me on the field because they're like, it's going to be so unfair if you trot out there, mate.
No, I was more of a Travis Hunter type, really. So,
I was more of a Julian Edelman, you know, slot,
yeah,
shifty, white,
gym rat.
So what?
Gym rat, high IQ.
Yeah, coach's kid, you know, really first in, last out. Right, so Nu, give me your top 3 then. Recap the top 3 for me.
Top 3, I've got Hunter, I've got Luther Burden, and then I have Tetairoa McMillan, or T-Mac, as his friends call him, and me.
And you're his friend.
And I am now.
So I'll do my top 4. At 4, I've got Travis Hunter. I think you can tell that he plays both ways. Really interesting prospect. Needs to commit to one position to really kind of reach that top end potential at either one, corner or wide receiver. I've got Luther Burden from Missouri as my wide receiver 3, a playmaker, offensive weapon, a real modern NFL receiver. Needs to, I think, show me that he can play out wide. And then my wide receiver 2, the unheard of my wide receiver 2 is the unheard of Alec Iomano from Stanford. Absolute beast of a man. I think he could almost be a bit more of a freak than Tetairoa McMillan, but we'll park that. Relative to what they can do. He size speed freak, can cover 100 meters in the blink of an eye, DB's worst nightmare, can move like someone 3 inches shorter and like 40 pounds lighter. Absolutely put Travis Hunter in Colorado in a blender. Weaknesses, has had a serious injury and bad quarterback play, so we'll see how that pans out this year. And finally, my wide receiver 1 is Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. Absolute alien, 6'5", 210 pounds. Put on an absolute clinic in week 1 of the college football season. I think you kind of can't have anyone else apart from him as your wide receiver 1 at the moment, really. But that's the thing with these things, though, isn't it? Is that all we need next week is Luther Burden to have a massive game and Tetairoa McMillan to have a bit of a quieter one, and suddenly these things flip. So
yeah, no, that is a fair point. But also, I mentioned his matching arm and leg sleeve is one of the coolest things I think I've ever seen.
Oh,
it is so cool. Like,
it is sick.
Yeah, no,
it is really cool. It is really cool. I saw that as well. Like, that is like, it's both on his right arm, right leg, isn't it?
Yeah, and
that is cold. That is really cold. Like also, who doesn't love Islanders, man? Like, who doesn't love like an Islander in the NFL? Like, those guys are absolute ballers, man. I don't know what they're feeding them over there, but they're monsters. But anyway, so those are our top wide receiver prospects. Obviously, there are more. Do not think that this is an exhaustive list, obviously. So if we've not mentioned a prospect that you really like or someone from your team, please let us know in the YouTube comments. If you're listening if you're listening on YouTube, then please subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, then please follow us. We also have social media on TikTok and on Instagram on Sportsmanlike Conduct Podcast. So go and like that as well if you don't already. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's been my co-host, Nick Corbs. You've been listening to Unsportsmanlike Conduct. We'll see you on the next episode.
See ya.